Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast. Whether you are a sales professional, not in sales, but interested in helping people solve problems, or a founder, CEO who is looking to grow your business, you'll find practical tools, stories, and experience you can apply to your role. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and I'm here with Mike Simmons, the founder of Catalyst Sale. Hello, Mike.
Hello, Jody.
Mike, I have a question for you this week.
Awesome.
And I know this is usually Mike and I will talk in advance about what the topic's going to be, but Mike doesn't know this one's coming because it's something that's come up for me. And I realized, Mike, as in my business, I sell a couple of different things. I sell courses, I sell coaching, I sell live events. I've never sold a physical product yet, but it just has me thinking with all of that, is there a different approach, or should there be a different approach when you're selling different things? Should I sell an event different than I sell coaching? Should I sell a course different than I sell a product?
I think there's a couple things to work through there. So at an extremely high level, and this is going to make the conversation really short, I would say no, there isn't a difference. There's not a difference when you talk about the foundational items that we look at with sales, or even this general definition of what sales is. Sales is about, from my perspective, connecting a problem that exists in the market with a solution that exists in the market. And that problem may be known or unknown, and the solution may be known or unknown. But if we're focused, if the idea of sales is connecting the dots between a problem and a solution, and then generating revenue based on addressing that challenge, getting fair value for the thing that fair compensation for the value that you're delivering, then whether you're selling a product or a service at a foundational level, the fundamental stuff is the same.
Well, in some areas that makes me feel comfortable, Mike, knowing that the selling is not any different. So let's then look at the basics. Like if the foundation, the principles, they don't change so I'm going to use myself as an example. One of the things I've sold a lot, is my service of coaching people through a podcast launch.
Yep.
Well, now I have the Podcast Magic course that I've been working on for a long time. So it's basically the same information, but it's a much different experience. You're not on the phone with me. I'm not actually holding you by the hand and showing you things, but it's all there in the course. So if that's true, it's the same information delivered much differently. In my mind, though, it was, I'm selling something completely different. But after hearing you talk, no, I'm really selling the same thing. Can you talk me through that?
Well, first, I'm confused because what you're describing is something that relates to what everybody keeps talking about as passive income. And if it's passive income, don't you just put it out there and let it go and you reap rewards?
I don't know, Mike. You tell me.
Yeah. Thanks, Jody. Jody, we're kind of in that same boat in that, and we've launched the course, the Catalyst Sale, and that's the intention. The intention is to be able to serve a large group of people that in a way that they're able to have an impact on their business, but we can do it at scale so that it doesn't require my direct time or your direct time, in the case of Podcast Magic, to be engaged with them all the way through the process. So there's a lot of design stuff that goes into it. So to work through the process, I think the first thing that you want to think through is, what problem are you solving in the marketplace? So what problem do you solve with the Podcast Magic course?
With the Podcast Magic course, I think there's actually two aspects to it. There is the actually getting your podcast launched, like physically all the places it needs to be, shows up in iTunes and all that. So you learn that, but to me, that's not the magic. The magic is what you learn from me after well over 1,000 episodes, hundreds of interviews. What have I learned along the way? That's Podcast Magic. And you've experienced a lot of it, Mike, because we've worked together for so long. Well, a lot of what we talk about podcasting, that sort of thing, is in this course. So the two problems it solves, and they go together closely unless someone already has a podcast out, then only one of the problems is solved. The problems it solved is, how do I create great content that people are going to want to listen to, that it feels right when I listen to this show? And the other is, how do I actually get my show launched? Okay, Jody talked to me about content and making sure the episodes are good. But now how do I literally launch the show? So those are the problems that it solves.
Yep. And are those problems known by the person who would kind of stumble across your stuff, stumble across Podcast Magic? Are those problems known or unknown to those folks?
The side of how do I actually launch my show, that's a known. People know, okay, there's something involved in actually getting my show to show up in Stitcher and iTunes and all the other places podcasts show up. Yep. So that part is known. If you want to launch a podcast, that is known for sure. Now, not everybody goes into it saying, I want to learn from a experienced professional podcast veteran to make sure I cut out the learning curve. So the first problem is definitely known. The second problem isn't as known, that I want to learn from someone who's done it all.
Yep. And what kind of experience do they go through in order to know the first problem?
When someone decides they're interested in doing a show, I think that's the first problem. They're like, I don't quite know how to get it out there. I don't know what to do. And you can find it by doing searches. You can piece it all together. But what Podcast Magic does is it just takes all that and says, hey, Mike, look here, just let me show you. This is everywhere you want your show. This is how you do it. This is how you set everything up on the back end. That's the sort of thing people are saying, okay, I know what I want to talk about, but I don't know what to do. Like, I don't actually know how to create a podcast and get it into Mike Simmons' ears.
Yep. So in this exercise that we're going through, this set of questions help us kind of understand what's the experience from the customer side, the endpoint, the person who would actually consume the content. And in this case, we're talking about someone who wants to build a podcast. They want to start creating content. They may want to do it for their business. They may want to do it inside their business. It could be for external customers or internal customers, but they've got some ideas that they want to share, and for whatever reason, they've decided podcasting is the way to share that information. The point here is that in each of your products or services that you deliver, whether it's a product or a service, you've got to work to put yourself in the shoes of the person who is experiencing the problem and not do the first thing that Jody did as he started describing the problem. He started describing the problem with some of the solution points, the how things are being addressed. And then as we got a little bit deeper, it turned into, here's actually the core problem. They don't know where to start. And I would even go a little bit further and say that the problem that you're solving when it comes to podcasting is helping people save time, helping people reduce the risk of making false starts associated with building out a podcast, helping people minimize the mistakes associated with doing things by following some direction that some person who just happens to have a microphone and lives in operates at a 12-foot by 12-foot office space with an ART 2100 microphone that was provided by the person that he worked with to get the podcast going. Just because I've got the tools, it doesn't mean I know how to do this. Yet there's a lot of noise that's out there from people who have the tools and have been doing it. They talk about how to do this stuff. You've got the practical experience that can help people bridge the gap between problem and solution. And our challenge as sales professionals as we go through this is figuring out who has the problem, why do they have the problem, what do they think about the problem, what would they like to do differently about the problem, what are the stakes if they don't address the problem. And I know we're moving through a lot of this stuff pretty fast, but the idea here is if I understand who cares about who has the problem, what they're doing about it today, what they'd like to do differently, why they care about it, why they've struggled with making a decision, then I can start to design communication and design experiences to support that decision-making process the customer goes through. Because the customer doesn't go through your sales process. When we talk about Catalyst sales process, and we'll include links to that in the show notes here, that sales process is about forecasting. It's about stages to determine where the customer is moving along. That sales process applies whether we're dealing with a product or a service. The customer goes through a decision-making process where they experience a problem. They realize they have a problem. They start to conduct research like Jody talked about. They start to assess potential solutions. They maybe start to test those solutions. They make a decision to move forward. And then once they've made that decision, they've got to go through the process of being able to justify the purchase. So this is where the B2C items start to separate from B2B, business to consumer, individual consumer versus business to business. The person who's making the decision, who's buying on behalf of others, may be spending someone else's budget. They've got to go through the process of justifying that budget. The person on the other side, on the individual consumer side, they're likely spending their own dollars. They may need to justify that in their home to make the investment. But whether we're talking about B2C or B2B, or we're talking about products or services, at the foundational level, sales is still the same. It's about connecting the dots between those problem and that solution. Jody, if that made the point or hit things home, or there's other areas to clarify there.
Well, the way you described it, it's easy to see that process that you walked me through, it doesn't matter that we were talking about a course.
Yep.
We could talk about coaching, or let's say I don't have this planned, but let's say I was going to do Podcast Magic Live, where you could actually come and learn about podcasting, and we'll launch your show there.
Right.
That same process could be applied to the live event. So now we've looked at it as in the coaching, the course, a live event, and it's all walking through the same process. And I get that now, that it doesn't matter what it is. And maybe I'm not creative enough to figure out what a physical product could be related to all this that I could sell. But even if there were, it's the same process that Mike just walked me through could also apply to a physical product.
I believe so. And I think we overcomplicate this because we think each of our products, each of our services, whether they're physical products or they're digital products, like I'm excited that we launched the course. I'm excited that we launched the course because it's the first Catalyst sale product that I've put out in the marketplace. And that's a pretty awesome milestone. It's pretty exciting to break through that piece. Jody, you've put out books and you're in the process of writing another book. You've got courses that you've co-developed with others. It's pretty neat when you ship a product, whether it's digital or physical. The primary difference between the digital product and the physical product, other than some of the logistics and some of those other things, which all start to play into the complexity of delivering things. Now, and so don't get us wrong as you're listening to this. It's not easy, but there are best practices that you can follow. And if you follow that system, at a minimum, you start to gather the data to say, am I moving in the right direction, or do I need to shift directions and start iterating on the approach that I'm taking in the market? But Jody, in my experience, and I've been in sales for a number of years, whether small transactional sales or long extended sales processes where we're dealing with multi-million-dollar solutions at a foundational level, it's still the same stuff. If I know how to gather data, if I know how to leverage story, if I know how to think about time management, doing the right things and saying no to the things I shouldn't be doing, if I can call others to action, use project management, and now this sounds like a pitch for the course, which now it's turning into, if I can do those things and I understand my customer at an individual or organization level, and I understand my business and how I operate, and I understand how I operate as a rep, all of this stuff becomes a lot easier or more predictable in the way that we execute going after our business, and the way that we can create these things, these elusive playbooks that everybody talks about. And many folks try to apply the same playbook from one organization to another organization. That's not the same as applying foundational and fundamental skills and fundamental approaches and fundamental methods. The methods are going to stay consistent. The actual vocabulary and the plays that you run, those are going to shift depending on what you know about your customer, what you know about your business, and what you know about the reps who are actually executing.
Well, Mike, this has been a beneficial conversation for me, certainly. And I know it's going to help a lot of other people to realize there is no difference in what you're selling. And it's the principles that stay the same across your suite of products. Or maybe you don't have a suite of products, but you have told yourself, well, what I sell is different than this because of, and I've fallen into that trap. I've thought, okay, now it's a course. Now I have to sell it differently than I was selling coaching. And it's just not true. It's not, I'm selling the same thing in the same way to the same people. It's just the delivery of what they experience might be a little different, but I'm selling the same thing, which is a solution to a problem.
That's right. And that problem and the way that people want to address it are going to change depending on who the people are. If we're talking about an early stage technical founder, who is bootstrapped, their approach to solving the problem is going to be a little bit different than a later stage founder who is funded by a large inflection or a large amount of money coming into their organization. And they're just on an extremely aggressive growth track where they're just pushing dollars and resources into things. So you've got to understand the audience, understand the difference between the audience who wants to go through it on their own, taking the course, versus the audience that wants to go in and do it as part of a community. Maybe they go to that live event, versus the audience who wants to work with you directly and get that direct coaching. Because, people, how could anybody say no to more time with Jody?
Well, I'm not going to argue with that. Mike, this was fantastic. Thank you so much. And also, if you've heard us both talk about our courses, and that wasn't the point of this episode, but if you're interested in either one, the podcast course or Mike's sales course, reach out to us and we'll definitely give you more information. CatalystSale.com, or Mike, I'm giving a free plug to myself here, JodyMayberry.com. I guess we'll take that up later.
Editor could always edit things out, right?
That's right.
No. And that's right. I mean, there are easy ways to get a hold of us. Jody's active on Twitter. He's active on LinkedIn. He's probably more active on Facebook and LinkedIn than he is on Twitter. And Instagram, he's got some really cool videos where he does a minute in nature. So, follow us on the interwebs, so to speak. And we look forward to hearing your feedback and your interest and your questions help inform the content that we put together on the podcast.
That's right. Thank you so much, Mike. And thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale Podcast.